My brother wanted me to co-sign a mortgage, even though he had no stable job. When I refused, they demanded I give him my apartment instead, and said I should move out to make things fair. I said no. I, 29M, find myself in an impossible situation with my parents, 58, 56, and younger brother James, 22, and I desperately need outside perspective because I'm beginning to question my own sanity. Let me provide some background first. I'm Michael, and I've spent the last 7 years building a stable life for myself. After graduating with a degree in computer science, I worked multiple internships before landing a position at a tech firm in downtown Chicago. The first few years were rough. Student loans, high rent prices, and the general cost of living meant I was barely scraping by. But I persevered, lived frugally, and eventually worked my way up to a senior developer position. 2 years ago, after saving meticulously and sacrificing countless nights out and vacations, I finally had enough for a down payment on a small apartment. It's nothing luxurious. Just a one-bedroom unit in a decent building in Lincoln Park. The mortgage payments stretch my budget, but it's mine. Every month when I make that payment, I feel a sense of pride that I'm building something for myself. My younger brother James has taken a different path. He attended the same university I did. Our parents paid for both our educations, but dropped out after 1 semester, claiming college wasn't for him. Since then, he's bounced between retail jobs, usually quitting when managers ask him to work weekends or arrive on time. He lives paycheck to paycheck, though that's being generous. He's frequently borrowing money from our parents for rent, gas, or the latest video game release. I don't judge James for not wanting the corporate life. What concerns me is his complete lack of financial responsibility. He drives a car our parents bought him, uses their Netflix and streaming accounts, and still receives regular emergency cash infusions from them. At 22, he's never had to face real consequences for his choices. This brings me to last Sunday. My parents invited me for their traditional weekly dinner. Everything seemed normal. We discussed my mom's book club, my dad's golf game, and caught up on family gossip. Then, as my mother served her homemade apple pie, the atmosphere shifted. "Michael," my dad began, using his serious business voice, "we need to discuss something important as a family." My stomach dropped. In my family, important discussions usually meant someone needed money. My parents explained that James had found an incredible opportunity, a house in Neepville that was being sold below market value. The owner needed a quick sale due to relocation, and James was convinced he could flip it for profit after some minor renovations. "It's a 3-bedroom house," my mother chimed in enthusiastically. "James has already lined up 2 friends who want to rent rooms. He'll live there and manage everything. It's perfect." I asked the obvious question. How is James getting a mortgage? Last I heard, he was working part-time at GameStop. That's when the real purpose of this dinner became clear. James's credit score was, in their words, not quite where it needs to be. In reality, I later learned it was in the low 500s, due to multiple defaulted credit cards and an unpaid car loan. Not the car my parents bought him, another one he'd financed and abandoned. "We were hoping," my mother said, reaching across the table to pat my hand, "that you could help your brother out. Just co-sign the mortgage application. Your credit is excellent, and it would mean so much to James." I nearly choked on my pie. Co-sign a mortgage for a house for my financially irresponsible brother. The mortgage would be $2,200 a month, my dad added quickly. But with 2 roommates paying $800 each, James only needs to cover $600. It's actually cheaper than his current rent. I pointed out the obvious flaws. What about utilities, property taxes, maintenance? What happens when the roommates move out? What if they don't pay? My parents dismissed each concern with a wave of their hands. James had thought of everything and had really matured lately. Then my mother delivered the guilt trip. "Michael, family helps family. When you were starting out, we helped you." This was technically true. They'd let me live at home for 6 months after graduation while I job searched. They'd also paid for my education, which I was grateful for, but I'd never asked them to co-sign loans or bail me out of financial mistakes. "I need to think about this," I said, trying to stay calm. "What's there to think about?" James interjected. He'd been unusually quiet until now. "You make bank at your tech job. This won't even affect you unless I screw up, which I won't." "If it won't affect me, then why do you need my signature?" I countered. The table fell silent. Then my dad cleared his throat and presented what they clearly thought was a reasonable compromise. "If you're worried about James making the payments," he said, "why don't you move into the house too? You could rent out your apartment, probably for more than your mortgage, and help James manage the property. It's a win-win." I stared at them in disbelief. They were seriously suggesting I leave my apartment to become my little brother's landlord roommate. "Actually," my mother added, her eyes lighting up, "James mentioned your apartment would be perfect for him. It's closer to his work. No yard maintenance and more his style. You two could simply swap. You get a house, he'd get an apartment better suited to his lifestyle." The absurdity of the suggestion left me speechless. They wanted me to co-sign a mortgage for a house I didn't want. I leave my carefully chosen apartment. I let my financially irresponsible brother live in said apartment. I moved to the suburbs to manage a rental property and trust that James would somehow pay me appropriate rent for my place. "That's not happening," I finally managed. My mother's face fell. "I don't understand why you're being so selfish, Michael. We sacrificed so much for you boys. Now that you're successful, you can't help your brother achieve his dreams?" "His dream of having me pay for his house?" I shot back immediately, regretting my tone. "No one's asking you to pay for anything," my father said sternly. "Just to help with the application. James will handle all the payments." "And if he doesn't?" "He will," my mother insisted. "Have some faith in your brother." Faith. They wanted me to risk my credit score, my financial future, and my home on faith in someone who couldn't even maintain a retail job for more than 3 months. I stood up, my appetite gone. "I need to think about this," I repeated. "This is a huge decision." "How long do you need?" James demanded. "The house won't be available forever. Other people are interested." "Then maybe one of them can co-sign for you," I suggested. The ride home was a blur. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my apartment. Text messages from my parents, missed calls from James, even a Facebook message from my aunt saying she'd heard I was being difficult about helping family. Over the next 3 days, the pressure campaign intensified. My mother sent long, emotional texts about how she'd failed as a parent if her sons couldn't support each other. She reminded me of every sacrifice they'd made, every dollar spent on my education, every opportunity they'd provided. My father took a different approach, sending me spreadsheets showing how the rental income would cover the mortgage, how property values in Neighborville were rising, how this was actually a smart investment opportunity I was passing up. James oscillated between anger and manipulation. One message would call me a selfish prick who forgot where he came from. The next would be about how he just wanted to build something like you did and how I was crushing his dreams. The extended family got involved too. My Aunt Patricia called to lecture me about family values. My Uncle Robert sent a condescending email about how successful people have an obligation to lift others up. Even my cousin Jennifer, who I barely speak to, posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about people who hoard their success instead of sharing with family. I spent those days agonizing over the decision. Was I being selfish? I did make decent money, $95,000 a year, which was comfortable but hardly wealthy in Chicago. I had savings, but they were earmarked for emergency funds and future goals. Co-signing this mortgage would mean taking on a massive liability that could destroy everything I'd worked for if James defaulted. But the family pressure was overwhelming. They made me feel like a monster for protecting my own interests, like I was spitting on everything they'd done for me by not immediately agreeing to risk my financial future for James's house flip fantasy. After 3 sleepless nights, I made my decision. I would not co-sign the mortgage. I would not give up my apartment. I would not enable James's continued irresponsibility. I crafted a careful response explaining my position. I emphasized that while I loved my family, co-signing a mortgage was a serious legal and financial commitment I wasn't comfortable making. I offered alternative help. I could assist James in improving his credit score, help him create a budget, or research first-time buyer programs he might qualify for on his own. The response was swift and brutal. My mother called me sobbing, saying I'd broken her heart and abandoned my brother. She accused me of being corrupted by money and forgetting my values. My father sent a cold, formal text. "I'm disappointed in the man you've become. Your mother and I will remember this when it's time to update our will." James simply sent, "You're dead to me. Don't ever ask me for anything. Hope your apartment keeps you warm at night." The extended family bombardment continued. I was called selfish, heartless, ungrateful, and worse. My phone became a source of anxiety, each notification another attack on my character. But I held firm. I knew that co-signing that mortgage would be financial suicide. James had no realistic plan, no stable income, and no history of responsibility. I would end up paying for the house while he lived in it, or worse, ruining my credit when he inevitably defaulted. 2 weeks passed in relative silence. I thought perhaps the storm had passed. Then I got a call from my mother, her voice bright and cheerful, as if our previous conversation hadn't happened. "Michael, wonderful news. James found someone else to co-sign, so you don't need to worry about it anymore. Isn't that great?" My relief was immediate, but short-lived. Who would co-sign for James? His friend Tyler from the gym, such a nice young man. He owns his own personal training business and was happy to help James achieve his dreams. A personal trainer co-signed a mortgage for my unemployed brother. Every alarm bell in my head went off, but I kept my concerns to myself. This was no longer my problem. "That's great, Mom. I hope it works out for James." "It will," she said confidently. "Tyler understands the value of investing in people, unlike some family members." The dig was obvious, but I let it slide. James had his co-signer, I had my peace of mind, and everyone could move on. Or so I thought. Update 1, posted 3 weeks later. I need to update because the situation has exploded in ways I couldn't have imagined, and I'm dealing with guilt, anger, and pressure like never before. 3 weeks after my last post, I got a hysterical call from my mother at 6 a.m. on a Saturday. Through her sobs, I gathered that James's house situation had imploded spectacularly. Here's what happened. James got the house with Tyler's co-signature. He moved in immediately, and his 2 guaranteed roommates backed out at the last minute. Apparently, they'd never actually committed, and James had just assumed they'd follow through. Instead of finding new roommates immediately, James decided to enjoy having the place to himself for a while. He threw a massive housewarming party that resulted in several thousand in damages, broken windows, damaged floors, neighbor complaints that led to fines. He used the money he should have saved for the mortgage payment to buy a new 75-inch television, PlayStation 5, and gaming setup for his streaming career. When the first mortgage payment came due, James had exactly $247 in his bank account. He'd quit his GameStop job the day after moving in because he needed to focus on fixing up the house. Fixing that never happened because he spent his days gaming and his nights partying. Tyler, the co-signer, found out when the bank called him about the missed payment. That's when Tyler discovered several fun facts. 1, James had lied about having roommates lined up. 2, James had lied about having savings for the first few months' payments. 3, James had lied about keeping his job. 4, James had already caused significant damage to the property. Tyler was furious and threatened legal action. He demanded James either pay immediately or sell the house. James, in typical fashion, blocked Tyler's number and pretended the problem would go away. This is where my parents called me in a panic. They wanted me to come to an emergency family meeting to solve the situation before it destroys James's future. Against my better judgment, I attended the meeting at my parents' house. James was there, looking annoyed rather than ashamed. Tyler was there too, along with his lawyer. The tension was palpable. Tyler's lawyer laid out the situation. James owed $3,400 in missed payments and late fees. There was approximately $5,000 in damages to the property. If James didn't pay within 10 days, Tyler would pursue legal action for breach of contract and damages. This would destroy both their credit scores and likely result in foreclosure. My parents' solution. They turned to me with hopeful expressions. "Michael," my dad began, "you're the only one in a position to help here." Their proposal was staggering in its audacity. 1. I should pay the $8,400 to cover missed payments and damages. 2. I should move into the house to supervise James and ensure future payments. 3. James would move into my apartment, yes, my apartment, rent-free, to reduce his stress. 4. I would collect rent from new roommates and manage the property. 5. Once the house was stable, James would take it back over. "This solves everyone's problems," my mother said earnestly. "Tyler gets his money, James keeps the house, and you get to invest in real estate." I looked around the room in disbelief. Even Tyler's lawyer seemed shocked at the suggestion. "How does me paying for James's mistakes and giving him my apartment solve anything?" I asked. "It's not about fault," my mother said. "It's about family helping family through tough times." "Tough times, James, created through lies and irresponsibility," I pointed out. James finally spoke up. "Look, I made some mistakes, okay? But you're sitting on a gold mine with that apartment. You could easily afford to help out. You're just being selfish." "Selfish?" I stood up. "I'm selfish for not wanting to pay for your house and give you my apartment?" "You make almost 6 figures," James shouted. "I make minimum wage. Of course you should help." "You made minimum wage," I corrected. "You quit your job, remember?" My father tried to mediate. "Michael, please. Your brother is facing serious legal consequences. Tyler could sue him. He could lose everything." "He should lose everything," I said. "He lied, he quit his job, he destroyed property, and he expects everyone else to clean up his mess." Tyler's lawyer interjected. "Mr. Thompson, while your family works this out, I need to know, will someone be paying these debts in the next 10 days? All eyes turned to me. The pressure was immense. My mother was crying. My father looked desperate. James was glaring at me with pure hatred. Even Tyler looked hopeful that I'd save him from this mess. "No," I said firmly, "I will not pay for James's mistakes. He needs to face the consequences of his actions." The room erupted. My mother wailed about how I was destroying my brother's life. My father accused me of abandoning family when they need you most. James called me every name in the book before storming out, but not before saying, "When I'm homeless, I hope you can live with yourself." Tyler and his lawyer left shortly after confirming they'd be pursuing legal action. My parents spent the next hour trying to guilt, manipulate, and browbeat me into changing my mind. They brought up every moment from our childhood, every sacrifice they'd made, every dollar they'd spent on my education. I finally left when my mother said, "If you won't help your brother, then you're no son of mine." The next week was hell. My phone rang constantly with calls from family members near and far. Everyone had an opinion on why I was a terrible person for not bailing James out. The narrative had been twisted. According to the family grapevine, I was a millionaire tech bro refusing to help my struggling brother keep a roof over his head. Some highlights from the messages. "Family means nothing to you." Aunt Patricia. "Your parents gave you everything, and this is how you repay them." Uncle Robert. "Must be nice to have money while your brother suffers." Cousin Jennifer. "I'm praying for your soul because clearly money has corrupted it." Great Aunt Linda. Meanwhile, the legal situation progressed. Tyler sued James for the full amount plus damages. James, having no money and no assets besides the house, was forced to sell. The quick sale meant taking a significant loss, which didn't cover what he owed Tyler. Tyler got a judgment against James for the remaining $45,000. James, facing wage garnishment and a destroyed credit score, declared bankruptcy. This process revealed even more debts I didn't know about. Credit cards, personal loans, even money borrowed from friends. The total was over $80,000. With no options left, James moved back in with our parents. You'd think this would be a wake-up call. You'd think everyone would realize that enabling James had led to this disaster. You'd think they'd stop blaming me for not throwing good money after bad. You'd be wrong. Update 2 posted 2 months later. I genuinely thought the situation couldn't get worse after James's bankruptcy and moving back with our parents. I underestimated my family's capacity for denial and manipulation. For 2 months, I maintained minimal contact. I responded to basic texts, sent birthday wishes, but avoided any real conversations. I needed space to process the guilt and gaslighting I'd endured. My therapist, yes, I started therapy, helped me understand that I'd made the right choice, even though it felt awful. Last week, that fragile piece shattered when my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Sunday morning. I was tempted not to answer, but I could see my mother had been crying, and worry overrode my better judgment. They sat on my couch, looking around my apartment with calculating eyes. My mother commented on how spacious it was for one person. My father noted the prime location and excellent natural light. Red flags everywhere. "We need to discuss James," my father began. Of course we did. It was always about James. They painted a pitiful picture. James was depressed, spending 18 hours a day gaming in his childhood bedroom. He'd gained weight, stopped showering regularly, and refused to look for work because, what's the point with bankruptcy on my record? They were worried about his mental health. Has he considered therapy? I suggested. There are programs for job training, financial counseling. No, my mother cut me off. What James needs is hope. He needs to feel independent again. Living with us makes him feel like a failure. I could see where this was going, but I let them continue, morbidly curious about what new scheme they'd concocted. "You've proven you're responsible, successful, adaptable," my dad said. "You could thrive anywhere. James needs more support." "Since you're so financially responsible," my mother added, "we think the best solution is for you to let James have this apartment." I actually laughed. It was so absurd I thought they were joking. The looks on their faces told me otherwise. "You want me to give James my apartment?" I asked. "Just to be clear." "Not give," my father clarified. "Just let him stay here. You'd still own it, pay the mortgage, handle the HOA fees. James would live here and get back on his feet." "Where would I live?" I asked, playing along. My mother pulled out her phone, showing me a listing. We found a lovely studio apartment downtown, only $1,800 a month. Very modern, perfect for a young professional. They wanted me to keep paying my $2,100 mortgage, plus $400 HOA fees. I pay an additional $1,800 for a studio apartment. I let James live in my apartment rent-free. Continue maintaining my apartment because James isn't handy. I cover any damages because, he's going through a tough time. "What would James contribute?" I asked. "His presence," my mother said without irony. "He'd take care of the place, water your plants, make sure it's secure." "Like he took care of the house?" I asked. "That was different," my mother insisted. "He was overwhelmed. An apartment is much simpler." The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. They genuinely believed that the solution to James's problems was for me to subsidize his entire life while paying double housing costs. "No," I said simply. "Absolutely not." The tears started immediately. My mother sobbed about being a failure as a parent. My father accused me of kicking James while he was down. They threw every manipulation tactic at me. We're getting older. We can't have James living with us forever. You have the means to help. Why are you being so cruel? This apartment is too nice for one person anyway. Family helps family. Why can't you understand that James would do this for you in a heartbeat?
That last one made me snap.
Really? When I was in college eating ramen for a week because I couldn't afford groceries, I asked James to lend me $50. He was living at home, working full-time, zero expenses. He told me to figure it out and bought a new Xbox that same week. He was young, my mother protested. He was 19 with a job. I'm not giving him my home. My father stood up, his face red. Then you're no son of mine. We're done here. They left, and within minutes my phone exploded with a familiar barrage of family hatred. But this time, something was different. I didn't feel guilty. Their demands had become so unreasonable, so detached from reality, that I finally saw the situation clearly. I was not responsible for James. I was not obligated to destroy my financial stability for him. I was not selfish for protecting what I'd earned through hard work and sacrifice. I made a decision. Complete no contact for 6 months minimum. I blocked everyone except my grandmother, who had always been reasonable. I found a therapist who specialized in family manipulation and started working through years of conditioning. The extinction burst was intense. They tried everything, showing up at my workplace until security removed them, sending letters to my building management claiming I needed welfare checks, having family friends reach out, pretending to catch up, then launching into guilt trips, creating fake social media profiles to message me, even contacting my ex-girlfriend to try to get her to convince me. But I held firm, and slowly the noise died down. Final update posted 1 month later. I'm writing this final update from a place of peace and clarity I didn't think was possible a few months ago. The 6-month no-contact deadline hasn't arrived yet, but I've already gained so much perspective. Through therapy, I've recognized patterns of manipulation that go back to my childhood. I was always the responsible one, expected to excel so my parents could point to their parenting success, while simultaneously sacrificing for James, the perpetual baby who needs help. 2 weeks ago, my grandmother called. I'd left her unblocked, as she'd always been the most reasonable family member. She asked to meet for coffee, promising no ambush, no guilt trips, just a conversation. I cautiously agreed. What she told me reframed my entire childhood. James wasn't just the baby of the family. He was an accident that nearly ended my parents' marriage. They'd been in counseling, considering divorce, when my mother got pregnant. They stayed together for the kids, but poured all their guilt and overcompensation into James. Every time he struggled or failed, they saw it as evidence of their failed marriage hurting him. So they cushioned every blow, fixed every problem, and never let him experience consequences. I watched them create this monster, my grandmother said sadly. Every time I suggested they let him fail and learn, they accused me of not understanding how damaged he was by their unhappy marriage. She also revealed that my parents had been lying to the family about my finances. They told everyone I made at least $200,000 and owned multiple investment properties. No wonder the family thought I was a selfish millionaire hoarding wealth while James suffered. My grandmother had been slowly correcting this narrative, but the damage was done. Half the family believed her, half thought she was covering for me. She didn't care. She was just glad I'd finally stood up for myself. What's happening with them now? I asked, against my better judgment. Her face darkened. Oh, Michael, it's so much worse than you know. Apparently, James's bankruptcy filing had triggered an investigation. The trustee found evidence of fraud, hidden assets, false income statements, and, most damning, evidence of an ongoing cryptocurrency scam. For months, James had been running a classic pump-and-dump scheme, convincing gym buddies and online gaming friends to invest in a fake cryptocurrency he'd created. He'd use the house as collateral for additional loans to invest in his own scam. planning to cash out and leave others holding worthless digital tokens. Several victims had already filed criminal complaints. The FBI was investigating. James was facing federal fraud charges with potential prison time of 5 to 10 years. My parents had liquidated their retirement accounts to pay for his defense attorney. They were now facing their own bankruptcy and would likely have to sell their house, the house where they'd raised us, where they'd planned to retire. They called me last week, my grandmother said, begging me to convince you to help with legal fees. They said, since you work in tech, you could explain that James didn't understand cryptocurrency and didn't mean to defraud anyone.
What did you tell them? I asked.
The truth, that their precious baby is a criminal who destroyed not just his own life, but the lives of innocent people who trusted him, and that you'd be insane to get involved. I sat in stunned silence. James wasn't just irresponsible. He was a criminal. And my parents were still enabling him, still making excuses, still trying to drag me into his mess. There's more, my grandmother said gently. Some of his victims are suing civilly. Your parents are named in one suit because James used their address for his business. They could lose everything. I felt a mix of emotions: sadness for my parents, anger at James, relief that I'd stood firm, and guilt for feeling that relief. My therapist later helped me understand these conflicting feelings were normal and valid. As I write this update, James is in federal custody, awaiting trial. My parents are living in a small apartment, their house sold to pay legal fees. Most of the family has gone quiet, either from shame or the realization that they backed the wrong horse. I've maintained no contact with my parents and James. I occasionally get updates through my grandmother, but have asked her to limit them to only essential information. I've donated anonymously to a fund set up for James's victims, people who lost their savings believing his lies. My apartment remains my sanctuary. My job continues to challenge and fulfill me. I'm in therapy, working through decades of manipulation and guilt. I've even started dating again, being upfront about my family situation with potential partners. Looking back, I see how close I came to disaster. If I'd co-signed that mortgage, I'd be liable for it during the bankruptcy. If I'd given James my apartment, it would now be seized as an asset in the fraud investigation. If I'd helped with the legal fees, I could have been implicated in the cover-up of his crimes. My selfish decision to protect myself turned out to be the only sane choice in an insane situation. My therapist has helped me understand that real love sometimes means letting people face consequences, that enabling isn't helping, and that sacrificing yourself for someone determined to self-destruct helps no one. To anyone facing similar pressure, trust your instincts. You are not responsible for other people's choices, even family. You are not selfish for protecting what you've earned. You are not cruel for refusing to enable destructive behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. Sometimes saving yourself is the only option when someone is determined to drown and pull you down with them. I'm building a new life without the toxic dynamics that nearly destroyed me. It's lonely sometimes, but it's honest. It's mine. And for the first time in my life, I'm truly free. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. Your validation and advice kept me sane when I doubted myself. Hold your boundaries, trust your gut, and remember, you can't save people who don't want to be saved. No is a complete sentence. Use it